The awakening. It was a quiet day across the world. People went about their daily routines, oblivious to the immense change that was quietly unfolding beneath the waves. Far below the surface of Earth's vast oceans, in a place where even the bravest explorers dared not venture, something was stirring. Something ancient, powerful, and unknown. Deep in the Mariana Trench, the deepest part of the world's oceans, a series of strange, low-frequency vibrations began to spread. At first, scientists thought it was just another anomaly, another earthquake, perhaps, or the sudden movement of tectonic plates. But this was different. The signals seemed to repeat, as if they were trying to convey a message. As weeks passed, the patterns became more defined, more deliberate. This was not natural. Around the world, the top marine research stations began to report unusual activity. Unexplained sonar readings were recorded by vessels in the Pacific, Atlantic, and Indian Oceans. It wasn't just the intensity of the signals, it was their consistency. Something was out there, in the dark depths, and it was waking up. The world's leading oceanographers couldn't explain what was happening. The phenomenon was far beyond anything they had ever encountered. Governments began to take notice. If something had been hidden in the oceans for so long, then it must be important. The first rumors began to spread. A new species of underwater creature, they whispered. Perhaps an ancient civilization, others speculated. No one knew for sure, but they all felt a sense of unease. Then, without warning, the signal stopped. The silence lasted for days. The calm was broken one early morning when a massive structure was detected rising from the depths. It wasn't like anything the world had ever seen. It was not a ship, nor a submarine, but a massive metallic shape that seemed to grow larger as it ascended, like some kind of dormant giant waking up from its slumber. The first reports were confused, with even military personnel unsure of what they were seeing. Whatever it was far bigger than any known vessel. It was almost as if the oceans themselves had birthed something that had been hidden for centuries. At first, only a few people caught glimpses of it: fishermen, deep-sea divers, and small research ships. But as the mysterious object neared the surface, it became impossible to ignore. It didn't rise from the sea as a whole. Instead, pieces of the massive ship began to break the surface, huge walls of metal, shimmering and almost glowing in the sunlight, like remnants of a forgotten world. It was enormous. Each section of the ship, each gigantic piece of hull, was as large as a city. Across the world, panic began to spread. Governments scrambled to assess the situation. The United Nations convened an emergency session. Military leaders called for action. Was this an invasion? Or perhaps something else, something far more dangerous? It was hard to tell. No one had any idea what this enormous thing was, or where it had come from. The news coverage was relentless. Each new development was broadcast to millions, sending waves of fear across the globe. People stayed glued to their screens, watching in awe and terror as more and more of the massive structure emerged from the ocean. The first images from drones and satellites confirmed what the scientists had feared. This was no ordinary ship. It was ancient, and it was unlike anything ever built by humanity. As the mysterious structure continued to rise from the ocean, an eerie silence blanketed the world. There was no communication from the object, no signs of life. But still, it loomed over the ocean like a giant, its purpose unknown. It felt as if it were a warning, something that had been waiting in the darkness for the right moment to make its presence known. Days passed, and the object grew closer to the shorelines of various countries. International tensions began to rise. Military fleets were dispatched to the regions near the sighting, ready to engage if necessary. Nations feared the worst, that the object was a weapon, a tool of war that had been hidden for eons, only now being unleashed upon an unsuspecting Earth. But then, something even more unsettling happened. The massive ship didn't head toward any specific landmass. Instead, it seemed to be waiting, as if it was preparing for something or waiting for an order to move forward. For a moment, it seemed as if the entire world had stopped, the giant ship frozen in place, hanging over the oceans like a dark omen. And yet, it made no move toward attack. It was as if the object was waiting for something or someone. Nations held their breath. The military grew restless, on edge. Governments began secretive discussions, and whispers of potential threats circulated. What could be the purpose of this ancient ship? Was it a harbinger of war, or was it something more? It was impossible to say. The world, once calm and full of daily routine, had now become a place of tension, uncertainty, and fear. The world's leaders knew that there was no going back. The moment the ship had risen from the depths, everything had changed. No longer could humanity afford to ignore the unknown, to continue living in peace without understanding the true dangers that lurked beyond the stars. As night fell on the world, the question remained, what was the true purpose of the awakening Titan Armada, and how would Earth respond to this looming, mysterious force? The first move would be the most critical. But what would it be? The first contact. As the days passed, the enormous structures that had risen from the depths of the ocean became more visible, drawing the attention of the world. The massive ships didn't just sit idle. They slowly moved toward the shore, their metal surfaces gleaming in the sunlight. From the coastal cities, people could see them clearly now, monolithic, imposing vessels that dwarfed anything humanity had ever constructed. But despite their size and strange, alien appearance, the ships made no hostile move. The world's military was on high alert. Nations around the globe began to prepare for the worst. Warships were dispatched. Fighter jets flew overhead, keeping a watchful eye on the approaching ships. The United Nations convened in an emergency session, debating what actions to take. Governments issued warnings to their citizens to stay inside, to stay away from the beaches, and to remain calm. But how could anyone remain calm when the very sky seemed to tremble at the sight of these strange, massive ships? It wasn't long before something unexpected occurred. As the ships neared the coastlines, they suddenly stopped. The deep, groaning hum that had accompanied their rise from the ocean became silent. The air was heavy, filled with an eerie sense of anticipation. Then, without warning, a signal was sent. A bright, flashing beam of light shot from the central ship, high into the atmosphere. It was a strange, pulsating light, blue, almost glowing, with an intensity that was unlike any natural phenomenon on Earth. It hovered in the air for a moment, then pulsed again, repeating its pattern. This was no ordinary transmission. It was clear this was an attempt to communicate, but with whom? And how? Scientists and military leaders quickly scrambled to analyze the beam. It seemed to carry a repeating series of signals, but they were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The transmission wasn't in any known language. It was a sequence of patterns, too complex for humans to decipher immediately. Some of the brightest minds on Earth began working around the clock, hoping to crack the code. It wasn't just a message. It was a demand for attention, a call to something greater. For the first time in history, humanity was faced with a true mystery, a message from the unknown. The days following the signal were filled with tension. World leaders didn't know what to make of it. Some suspected that it was an invitation for peace, a gesture of goodwill from a civilization more advanced than humanity had ever imagined. Others, however, feared that the light was some kind of trap, an invitation to a deadly game where humanity was the prey. The tension was unbearable. The atmosphere was thick with uncertainty. People across the globe watched the events unfold in real time, with news agencies constantly updating the situation. Reports poured in from coastal areas, where citizens watched as the enormous ships loomed on the horizon, silent and unmoving. Some believed the ships were waiting for something, waiting for a response from Earth. But what would that response be? What could humanity offer to these beings? And then, as the world held its breath, another unexpected event occurred. A massive triangular shape emerged from the central ship. It was like nothing anyone had ever seen. Its surface shimmered with a strange reflective quality, and it slowly descended toward the Earth. People stared at it in awe, their hearts racing as they realized that the ship was no longer just a passive observer. It was actively preparing to make contact. As the triangular shape neared the ground, it began to slow. The sound of its descent was deep and resonant, almost like a low-frequency hum that reverberated through the air. The closer it got, the more the tension mounted. It was clear that something monumental was about to happen. The world waited in silence, holding its breath. And then, without warning, a massive metallic ramp extended from the descending ship, hitting the ground with a thunderous crash. The ramp extended all the way to the Earth, creating a direct pathway from the ship to the surface. A silence fell over the world as everyone realized that something unprecedented was about to occur. What happened next was almost impossible to comprehend. From the depths of the ship, a figure began to emerge. At first, it seemed like a silhouette, an alien shape that stood tall, like a humanoid figure. But as it stepped closer to the ramp, details began to form. The being was unlike anything the world had seen. It was tall, with an elegant metallic sheen to its body. Its movements were graceful, fluid, and seemingly effortless, but its presence was commanding. It was clear that this was not just an alien. This was a leader, a being of immense power. The first contact had been made. The being, now fully visible, stood on the ramp, gazing down at the Earth below. Its eyes, glowing a faint blue, seemed to scan the crowd that had gathered in stunned silence. It looked not at one individual, but at the world as a whole. There was no fear, no anger in its gaze, but there was something deep and inscrutable, something that suggested the being had seen things that humans could barely comprehend. Then, in a voice that seemed to echo from everywhere, the alien spoke. The language was incomprehensible at first, but there was something undeniably powerful in its tone. It was clear that this was not a typical first contact. This wasn't just about introducing a new species, it was about something far more important. The message the alien conveyed was simple, yet profound. We have come, not to conquer, but to offer something greater. Its words echoed across the world. The being wasn't here to wage war, but to deliver a message. What that message was, however, remained to be seen. In an instant, the world's fears began to shift. Was this a peaceful visit, a promise of alliance, or something darker? The alien didn't say much, but the message was clear. Earth was now part of something much bigger, a story far beyond the stars. The true journey was only beginning. The revelation. The world was in chaos. Governments scrambled to respond to the sudden appearance of this alien leader and the massive ships that had silently descended upon Earth. While many feared that the beings were preparing for war, the message they had delivered was confusing yet intriguing. We have come, not to conquer, but to offer something greater. What could it mean? What was this greater thing they had to offer? For days, world leaders and the scientific community debated their next move. The initial response was one of caution. The world's military forces were on high alert, keeping a watchful eye on the alien ships, while diplomatic channels were open, though no one knew what to say. Communication had already been established, but understanding, that was still far from clear. The alien leader's message had been cryptic, but it was unmistakably a call to engage, a call to learn more. Governments began to form a united front, deciding that the first priority was to make contact with these extraterrestrials. But how could humanity speak to a being so different from them, so incomprehensible? A small group of human scientists and diplomats were chosen to be the first to step forward and engage with the alien leader. Among them were some of the brightest minds on Earth, linguists, physicists, and diplomats, all tasked with deciphering the meaning behind the message and the intentions of this new and powerful force. They were led by Dr. Mia Sanderson, an expert in interspecies communication, who had worked on the theoretical side of first contact for years. Now she found herself thrust into a real-life situation far beyond anything she had imagined. The meeting took place in the heart of a large, secure facility located miles away from any major city. The chosen group, including Dr. Sanderson, was flown in a convoy of military aircraft to the facility, where the alien leader awaited. There, in the midst of great anticipation and uncertainty, they prepared to enter the unknown. The alien leader, who had been referred to as Vekar by the international media, stood waiting on a platform surrounded by a shimmering force field that seemed to pulse with a gentle, calming glow. Its presence was commanding, yet serene. The beings who accompanied it, standing in a circle around the leader, were smaller in size, but equally imposing. Their bodies glowed faintly, their movements fluid and deliberate, as though they existed in perfect harmony with their surroundings. Dr. Sanderson, along with her team, stepped forward. The air seemed heavy with an electric charge, the feeling that something monumental was about to unfold. As they approached the platform, Vekar raised one hand in a motion of peace. The alien's eyes, glowing a soft, brilliant blue, met Dr. Sanderson's gaze, and in that moment, she felt something unlike anything she had ever experienced. A connection, as if the being was not just seeing her, but understanding her. It was as if Vekar could read the very essence of who she was. And then, Vekar spoke, the voice resonating deeply within her mind. It wasn't a language they could hear. Instead, it was as though the words bypassed the ear entirely, entering straight into their consciousness. The message was clear and direct. We are not conquerors. We are travelers, seeking knowledge and understanding. You have something we need. Your capacity to adapt and evolve. You will become part of something greater than your planet. Together, we will change the course of the cosmos. The words echoed in Dr. Sanderson's mind, and a sense of awe and dread washed over her. There was no malice in the alien's tone, no sign of aggression, but the implications of what was being said were overwhelming. This was not a simple interaction. These beings were not here to simply explore Earth. They were offering humanity a role in something far more vast, something that spanned the entire universe. But the question remained, what did they want from humanity? Why had they come? What was this greater thing they spoke of? Before Dr. Sanderson could speak, Vekar continued, their voice now more urgent. You are in danger. Your planet is caught in the midst of a cosmic struggle, one that will soon reach your doorstep. Your survival depends on your willingness to trust us. The words sent a chill down Dr. Sanderson's spine. A cosmic struggle. What kind of danger could they possibly be referring to? Was this an opportunity for humanity to become part of an intergalactic alliance, or was this a warning of something far darker, a battle for survival that stretched across the stars? The other members of the team exchanged glances, their faces pale with the weight of the revelation. They had no answers, only more questions. But Dr. Sanderson understood one thing in that moment. This wasn't a choice. Humanity was being thrust into the heart of a much larger conflict, whether they were ready or not. Vekar's eyes softened, and a faint, knowing smile appeared on their face. You will soon understand. But first, you must choose. Will you embrace the knowledge and power we offer, or will you remain in the dark, bound to your planet and its limitations? The alien leader's words hung in the air, laden with the weight of a decision that could change the course of human history forever. In that moment, Dr. Sanderson realized the truth. Humanity had no choice but to face the unknown. The decision had been made for them. But would they be able to comprehend the full extent of what was about to unfold? The fate of Earth, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. The choice. The weight of Vekar's words settled on the room like a thick fog. Dr. Sanderson, along with the other members of her team, stood frozen, trying to comprehend the gravity of what they had just heard. The alien leader, standing so still, had conveyed a message that felt like both an invitation and a threat. It was clear that this wasn't just a casual meeting. It was a call to action, one that could either secure humanity's place in the stars or doom them to oblivion. Vekar's gaze remained locked with Dr. Sanderson's, as if waiting for her to speak, to respond. The silence between them stretched out, tension hanging in the air. Every second felt like an eternity. The members of the team exchanged nervous glances, their faces pale, their minds racing to process the implications. Dr. Sanderson, ever the diplomat, was the first to break the silence. Her voice, though steady, carried the weight of a question that had been plaguing her mind since the moment the aliens arrived. "What do you mean by a cosmic struggle?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question was on everyone's mind, but it had to be asked. Vekar's eyes glowed a little brighter, a slight shift in their expression that hinted at the seriousness of the matter. "You are part of a much larger conflict," Vekar explained, their voice now clear and resonant, as though speaking directly into her soul. "An ancient war that spans across galaxies. Your planet, though young and isolated, is a key to the balance of power in this struggle. We have been watching you for a long time, waiting for the right moment to offer our guidance." The team members shifted uneasily at these words. Watching us? For how long? Why hadn't they intervened before? These were questions that filled the air with uncertainty. Dr. Sanderson pressed on, trying to understand the full scope of what Vekar was implying. "And what role do you see humanity playing in this struggle? Are we being asked to join this war?" The alien leaders shook their heads slowly, a gesture that seemed to indicate both regret and solemnity. "No, we do not wish to bring you into this conflict directly. You are not yet ready for that. However, your potential is vast. You have the ability to adapt, to learn quickly, and to turn the tide of the war in ways that others cannot. This is why we are offering you our knowledge." The alien's words were both flattering and terrifying. Humanity, despite its seemingly primitive beginnings, was being seen as a force of great importance, a power that could tip the balance of an ancient war. It was a concept that was difficult to grasp. Dr. Sanderson's mind raced. Was this truly an opportunity for humanity to join something greater than themselves? Or was it simply a way for Vekar to gain an advantage in a war that didn't involve them? "What is it that you want from us?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "Why offer us your knowledge now? What is the cost?" Vekar's gaze softened, and the expression on their face seemed almost compassionate. "We do not ask for loyalty. We do not demand that you fight for us. All we ask is that you consider the future. We are offering you the chance to be part of something larger, something that will expand your understanding of the universe and your place in it. In return, we require only your willingness to learn." A sense of dread began to seep into Dr. Sanderson's thoughts. The offer seemed too good to be true. There had to be a catch. No one gave away such power, such knowledge, without asking for something in return. "And if we refuse?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly despite herself. Vekar's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, there was a hint of something darker in their expression. "Then you remain here, isolated. Your planet will continue to struggle, and you will never know what lies beyond your star system. You will be left behind, a pawn in a game you cannot even comprehend. The war will come to your doorstep, and you will have no way of defending yourselves." Dr. Sanderson swallowed hard. The weight of those words struck her deep in her chest. It wasn't just a warning. It was a reality that was already unfolding. "We don't want to be left behind," one of the scientists, Dr. Allen, spoke up from the back of the room. His voice was shaky, but his words carried the truth of the moment. "We can't afford to be left behind." Vekar nodded in agreement. "You understand. That is why we are here now. You must decide, Dr. Sanderson. Your planet's future is in your hands." The alien leader's words hung in the air, each one heavier than the last. Dr. Sanderson felt the burden of the decision pressing down on her. There was no easy answer. Humanity was being given a choice that could change the course of their future forever. Would they embrace the knowledge and power the aliens offered, or would they reject it and risk being caught in the crossfire of a war they didn't even understand? The decision was not just hers to make. It was up to the entire world to decide. But as Dr. Sanderson looked at her team, She knew that the answer would not come easily. The choice was fraught with uncertainty, with fear, and with hope. And yet there was no turning back. The cosmic struggle had already begun. The fate of Earth, and perhaps the entire galaxy, now hung in the balance. The unseen enemy. The decision was made. Dr. Sanderson had no time to waste. The weight of humanity's future now rested on her shoulders, and the alien's words echoed in her mind. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. They weren't simply playing the game of politics with alien races. They were now part of an ancient war that had been simmering for eons. And as much as Vekar's offer seemed like a lifeline, there was something about it that didn't sit right with her. The team had been tasked with delivering humanity's response to the alien alliance. They were to agree to the terms, to learn, to prepare. But there were too many unanswered questions. Why hadn't the aliens contacted humanity sooner? Why had they chosen now, at a time when humanity was at its most vulnerable? Dr. Sanderson found herself walking through the corridors of the research facility, her thoughts swirling like a storm. The quiet hum of the lights above was a stark contrast to the chaos in her mind. She didn't trust the aliens completely. Not yet. And she wasn't sure if she could ever fully trust them. But there was no denying that Earth's position was precarious. In her gut, she could feel the tension rising, an unsettling sense that they were stepping into something much bigger than they had prepared for. Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by a faint beeping sound from her communicator. She hurriedly pulled it from her pocket and saw that it was an incoming transmission from the United Nations. It was an encrypted message, one that could only mean one thing: an emergency. Dr. Sanderson, we've just intercepted a transmission from the alien fleet. The voice on the other end said, "It's urgent. You need to see this immediately." Her heart skipped a beat. She had been expecting something like this, but hearing the urgency in the voice made it all too real. "I'll be right there," she said, her voice steady, even though her mind was racing. She made her way quickly to the command center, her mind already formulating the possibilities. What could be so urgent that the aliens needed to contact her directly? Had something gone wrong? When she entered the command room, the screen was already displaying a live feed from the alien fleet's communication hub. The image was fuzzy at first, but it quickly sharpened into a clear visual. The face of Vakar appeared, but this time, there was something different in their expression, an unmistakable urgency. "We have just received word of an impending threat," Vakar said, their voice cold and serious. "An enemy faction, one that has been hidden from your eyes for centuries, is closing in. They are known as the Zoreth, and they are coming for your world." The words hit Dr. Sanderson like a punch to the gut. The Zoreth. She had heard of them. Stories from the fringes of the galaxy, whispered rumors among the most distant civilizations. A race so ruthless, so relentless, that they had managed to remain hidden for eons. And now, they were coming for Earth. "What do you mean, coming for Earth?" Dr. Sanderson asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and confusion. "We didn't even know they existed. Why are they targeting us now?" Vekar's expression grew darker. "The Zoreth have been watching your planet for some time. They know that humanity's potential is growing rapidly. They see you as a threat to their control over the galaxy. Your rapid technological advancement, your relentless drive for exploration. It has caught their attention, and they will stop at nothing to destroy you before you become too powerful." Dr. Sanderson's mind raced. The pieces were starting to come together, but the picture was far from clear. If the Zoreth had been watching Earth for years, why hadn't they attacked sooner? What was their true goal? And how could they defeat such a formidable enemy when they hadn't even been given the tools to defend themselves? "How much time do we have?" Dr. Sanderson asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Vekar's eyes narrowed. "You have very little time. The Zoreth fleet is already on its way, and they will be within striking distance in a matter of days. If you do not act quickly, your world will be destroyed." A chill ran down Dr. Sanderson's spine. Days? They had days to prepare for an enemy they knew almost nothing about. It seemed impossible, but the alien leader's tone left no room for doubt. The Zoreth were coming, and they were not to be underestimated. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the room in stunned silence. Dr. Sanderson took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The stakes had just been raised to an unimaginable level. The fate of humanity now rested not only on her decision to accept the aliens' help, but on the time she had left to prepare for a war they were completely unprepared for. As the team around her began to scramble, gathering information and preparing for the coming battle, Dr. Sanderson couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Why had the Zoreth waited so long to make their move? And why were they now so determined to wipe humanity from the galaxy? The answers were out there, but they were buried in the vastness of space, hidden behind layers of secrets, centuries of ancient wars, and enemies who would stop at nothing to crush the rising star that was humanity. And as the countdown to the Zoreth's arrival ticked away, Dr. Sanderson knew one thing for certain. Earth had just become the center of a galactic conflict, and there was no turning back. The descent into war. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Dr. Sanderson hardly slept, spending every waking moment working alongside the top military strategists and alien emissaries, trying to prepare for the oncoming invasion. Every piece of information about the Zoreth, everything that could give them an edge, was carefully analyzed and scrutinized. But the more they uncovered, the less they seemed to understand. The Zoreth were not just another alien species. They were an ancient and terrifying force that had decimated entire civilizations. Their warships were said to be nearly indestructible, their weapons capable of erasing entire cities in a single strike. It was becoming clear that Earth was not just facing an invasion. It was facing extinction. Dr. Sanderson sat in the dimly lit command center, the weight of the situation pressing down on her shoulders. She glanced at the holographic map of the solar system, her eyes tracing the path of the approaching Zoreth fleet. They were getting closer with every passing hour. There was no escaping the fact that a battle was inevitable. But what could they do? The odds were stacked against them, and they had so little time to prepare. Dr. Sanderson, we have a situation. A voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to see Lieutenant Carter, one of the lead military officers, standing at the doorway. He was sweating, his face pale with worry. "What is it, Lieutenant?" Dr. Sanderson asked, already sensing the gravity of the situation. "We've just intercepted another transmission from the Zoreth fleet," Carter said, walking over to the command console. He tapped a few buttons, and the screen came to life, displaying the cold, emotionless face of a Zoreth commander. The message was simple, chilling, and direct. Humanity is a threat that must be eradicated. Surrender or face destruction. Your resistance is futile. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in the room. Dr. Sanderson felt a wave of nausea wash over her. The Zoreth weren't interested in negotiations. They didn't care about humanity's potential. They simply wanted to crush them. "We don't have time for this," she muttered under her breath, turning back to the map. "We need to come up with a plan, something unexpected. We can't fight them head-on with what we have. We need to outsmart them." The room was quiet as the team processed her words. The Zoreth were too powerful to engage in a traditional battle. But that didn't mean there weren't other ways to fight. Earth had something the Zoreth didn't: unpredictability. "We need to level the playing field," Dr. Sanderson said, her voice growing firmer. "Get me everything we have on the Titan Armada, the alien fleet that offered us their help. If they're willing to fight with us, we might stand a chance. But we need to figure out how to use them effectively, how to give them the edge over the Zoreth." As she spoke, Dr. Sanderson's mind raced. The Titan Armada was humanity's only hope, but even they weren't invincible. She had to make sure they were ready to fight, to defend Earth with everything they had. In the days that followed, the team worked tirelessly to integrate alien technology into Earth's defense systems. The Titan Armada shared their knowledge, but it was clear that there was more to the alliance than they were letting on. The alien ships were powerful, their weapons far more advanced than anything humanity had, but there was a price for their assistance. Dr. Sanderson couldn't shake the feeling that there was something they weren't being told, a truth buried deep within the alliance that could tip the balance in their favor. As the countdown continued, the tension in the air grew unbearable. The Zoreth fleet was almost within striking distance. Every hour felt like a year. And the longer they waited, the more the feeling of impending doom weighed on Dr. Sanderson's heart. The day finally arrived. The Zoreth fleet was entering Earth's orbit, their massive ships casting long shadows over the planet. The sky darkened as the first of their warships appeared on the horizon, an army of destruction that was about to descend on Earth. But as the Zoreth approached, something unexpected happened. The Titan Armada, a fleet of colossal ships from deep within the galaxy, appeared on the edge of the solar system, their engines glowing with an eerie light. Their presence was like a breath of fresh air, a glimmer of hope in an otherwise hopeless situation. But as the two fleets squared off, Dr. Sanderson couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The tension was thick in the air. Was this truly the help they had been promised? Or was this just the beginning of an even greater disaster? The first shots rang out across the sky. Dr. Sanderson watched in horror as the Zoreth fleet opened fire on the Titan Armada. Their weapons were devastating, the explosions shaking the very core of space. And yet the Titan ships held their ground, firing back with their own arsenal of unimaginable power. But as the battle raged on, it became clear that the Titan Armada was not invincible. They were powerful, but the Zoreth were relentless. And with every passing minute, the odds seemed to tilt further in the favor of the invaders. Dr. Sanderson's mind raced. She had to think fast. They had no backup plan, no contingency for failure. The fate of Earth was now in her hands, and she had to find a way to turn the tide of the battle before it was too late. But then something happened that no one could have anticipated. The Titan Armada's flagship, a massive ship known as the Eternal Titan, suddenly detached from the rest of the fleet. It moved forward, its engines blazing with an intensity that sent shockwaves through space. The Zoreth ships focused all their fire on the massive vessel, but the Eternal Titan didn't flinch. Instead, it unleashed a weapon unlike anything anyone had ever seen before, an energy blast so powerful that it tore through the Zoreth fleet, causing massive explosions that sent the invaders reeling. The power of the blast was so immense that it sent ripples through the fabric of space itself. For a moment, everything was still. The Zoreth fleet was in disarray, their ships crippled and retreating. The Titan Armada had delivered a devastating blow, but the battle was far from over. Dr. Sanderson breathed a sigh of relief, but she knew that the war was just beginning. The Zoreth wouldn't stop. They couldn't. But for the first time since the invasion began, humanity had a chance, and that chance lay in the hands of the Titan Armada and the unimaginable weapon they had just unleashed. But as the smoke cleared and the remnants of the Zoreth fleet scattered into the dark void, Dr. Sanderson knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning of a far greater war. The Zoreth would return, and next time, humanity would be ready. The final stand. The aftermath of the initial battle between the Titan Armada and the Zoreth fleet left Earth in a state of uneasy peace. The skies had cleared, and for the first time in weeks, humanity breathed a collective sigh of relief. But Dr. Sanderson knew this was just the calm before the storm. The Zoreth had been wounded, but they were not defeated, and the Titan Armada's incredible weapon, while powerful, had only delayed the inevitable. Inside the command center, the team was working tirelessly, analyzing the aftermath of the battle. The once promising alliance with the Titan Armada was now in question. The attack by the Eternal Titan had given Earth a temporary victory, but it had also exposed the true nature of the Titan Armada's capabilities. They were not infallible. The Zoreth were relentless, and they had tasted the power of the Titan's weapons. Dr. Sanderson knew that the Zoreth would return in greater numbers, and Earth had to be prepared for the worst. "We don't have much time," Dr. Sanderson said, her voice steady but laced with concern. She stood before a massive holographic display of the solar system, her finger tracing the path of the retreating Zoreth fleet. "The Zoreth are regrouping. They've suffered losses, but they've also learned from the attack. We need to find a way to capitalize on our advantage before they strike again." Lieutenant Carter, who had been working beside her, looked up from the console. "Do we have any intel on their next move? Any indication of when they'll return?" "We're working on that," Dr. Sanderson replied, her eyes narrowing. "But we need to think beyond just defeating them in battle. If we can find a way to disrupt their command structure, maybe we can break their resolve. If we can cut off their leadership, we might stand a chance." It was a risky move, but it was the only one they had. The Zoreth were an organized and militaristic species, and their command hierarchy was a key part of their strength. If they could take down the Zoreth's leadership, even temporarily, they could throw the entire fleet into disarray. It was a long shot, but at this point, they had no other option. Dr. Sanderson turned to her team, her voice firm. "We're going to have to take the fight to them. If we can get a small, elite force into their fleet undetected, we might be able to infiltrate their command ship and disable their communications. It's a suicide mission, but it's the best shot we've got." The room fell silent. The idea of infiltrating a heavily guarded Zoreth command ship was nothing short of madness. The Zoreth had already demonstrated their brutal efficiency in battle, and their defenses were far stronger than anything Earth had. But Dr. Sanderson's determination was infectious. The Titan Armada was their last hope, and if they couldn't count on the aliens to deliver a final blow, they would have to do it themselves. After a tense pause, Lieutenant Carter spoke up. "I'll volunteer for the mission. We have the technology to sneak a team inside their fleet, and if anyone can do it, it's us. We'll disable their command, disrupt their communications, and buy Earth the time it needs." Dr. Sanderson nodded, her gaze unwavering. "I know it's a dangerous mission, but we don't have any other choice. We will make sure you have everything you need. And if this works, it might just be the key to turning the tide of the war." The next few hours were a blur of preparation. Earth's best soldiers, engineers, and strategists came together to devise a plan for the infiltration mission. They would need to use the stealth technology developed by the Titan Armada to sneak into the Zoreth fleet undetected. Once inside, they would need to disable the Zoreth command center and disrupt their fleet's communications network, preventing them from organizing an effective counterattack. The team that volunteered for the mission was small but determined. Lieutenant Carter led the group, alongside a few of the most skilled operatives, including Commander Vance, an expert in alien technology, and Dr. Jenkins, who had been working with the Titan Armada's engineers to adapt their weapons for Earth's use. Together, they would infiltrate the heart of the Zoreth fleet and take the fight directly to their command. As they boarded the stealth ship, the weight of the mission settled on their shoulders. They knew the odds of survival were slim, but they had no choice. Earth was depending on them. If they failed, the Zoreth would return, stronger and more determined than ever. The stealth ship cut through the void of space, its hull coated with advanced cloaking technology that rendered it invisible to the Zoreth's detection systems. It moved silently, like a shadow among the stars, heading straight into the heart of enemy territory. The Zoreth fleet loomed ahead, a dark and menacing presence that stretched across the heavens. The team's destination was the command ship, the nerve center of the Zoreth's war efforts. If they could disable it, they could buy Earth the time it needed to mount a real defense. As they approached the Zoreth fleet, tension ran high. They could see the immense warships of the enemy, their weapons powered up and ready to fire. But they were still undetected, at least for now. Once they were within range, Lieutenant Carter gave the order. The team deployed, slipping onto the command ship with the quiet precision of ghosts. The ship's interior was a maze of cold, metallic corridors, lit only by dim, flickering lights. It was like walking through the belly of a monster. They encountered no resistance at first, but they knew it was only a matter of time before the Zorath realized they were there. The team moved swiftly, planting explosives on key systems and hacking into the Zorath's communications network. But just as they were about to complete their mission, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors. Zorath soldiers appeared from around a corner, their eyes glowing with a fierce red light. The team had been discovered. "Move out now," Lieutenant Carter shouted. Gunfire erupted as the team fought their way through the Zorath warriors. The odds were against them, but they pushed forward, determined to finish the job. In the final moments of the mission, Dr. Sanderson watched from the command center as the team activated the explosives. The Zorath fleet began to falter, their communications thrown into chaos. The Titan Armada, still hovering in the distance, began to rally, delivering a devastating counterattack on the Zorath ships, catching them off guard. It was the turning point that Earth needed. The Zorath's once mighty fleet was now scattered and disorganized. But as Dr. Sanderson watched the chaos unfold, she knew the battle was far from over. The war had only just begun, and Earth's fate still hung in the balance. The team had done their part. Now, it was time for humanity to rise and claim victory. The mysterious arrival. The galaxy had been peaceful for centuries, a vast expanse of stars where different species coexisted. Civilizations thrived, some more advanced than others, but all respected the fragile balance of the universe. But everything changed with a simple, strange message. It came from a system that no one had visited in over 1,000 years, a place once thought abandoned, with only ancient ruins scattered across its dark corners. The message was short and cryptic. "The bipeds are coming." At first, no one understood. Who were the bipeds? Why would such a message be enough to shake the very foundations of the Galactic Council? Diplomatic officials, generals, and even the most respected historians began to scramble for answers. No one had heard of such a species, and the very name felt like a threat. The idea of unknown beings entering the galaxy was not something to take lightly. A council meeting was called. Representatives from all corners of the galaxy gathered, their faces filled with confusion and fear. "Who are the bipeds?" asked the human representative, a stern woman named Ambassador Lyra. Her voice echoed through the grand hall, and the room fell silent. She had seen countless species in her time, but this was different. This was something unknown. "I don't know," said the draconian elder, his voice deep and grating. "But I have heard whispers, old, ancient stories from my people. There is something in the records, something about a race of bipeds from the forgotten era. They were called conquerors, and their name alone was enough to send fear into the hearts of even the most powerful civilizations." The council members exchanged nervous glances. What was this species capable of? Were they still around? The last records of their existence were lost, buried in time, and no one knew where to find answers. But one thing was clear: the galaxy wasn't prepared for what was coming. Suddenly, another message arrived. It wasn't a text like the first one, but a broadcast. It was a signal, simple yet powerful, stretching across space. A ship had entered the system, a massive vessel that seemed to carry the weight of ages. It was unlike any other, ancient in design, yet somehow still intact. The ship's technology was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The light from its engines flickered with an eerie, almost unnatural glow. The fear intensified. If these bipeds were returning, then they hadn't forgotten. The galaxy's most terrifying legends were real, and they were about to be unleashed. Ambassador Lyra, along with a fleet of diplomats, was chosen to investigate. They were to meet the strangers, find out who they were, and what they wanted. As the ships traveled through space toward the unknown system, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The air felt heavy with tension, like the calm before a storm. As they entered the planet's orbit, the diplomats could see the wreckage of a civilization, ancient but strangely preserved. Massive structures, half buried under dirt and rubble, lay scattered across the barren landscape. The ruins told a story of a once great civilization, but now they were only remnants of something lost in time. This place has been untouched for thousands of years, Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. Why now? Why are they coming back? The fleet landed near one of the massive ruins, and the team stepped out, their boots sinking into the thick sand of the forgotten world. The air was still, the only sounds coming from their own footsteps. The silence was deafening. As they approached the ruins, something strange began to happen. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and then, as if answering a call, the ancient structures started to move. Slowly, they began to rise, revealing hidden chambers and passages that had been sealed for millennia. The crew looked on in awe and fear as the ruins seemed to come to life. The ship from the biped's fleet hovered above them, its engines glowing brighter now. The message was clear. They were ready to meet the galaxy, but the galaxy was not ready for them. Everyone stay alert, Lyra ordered. This is unlike anything we've ever encountered. They made their way through the ruins, the walls lined with strange symbols that none of them could decipher. The air grew colder, and the sense of being watched became overwhelming. Every shadow seemed to move. Every creak of metal felt like an omen. At the heart of the ruins, they found a large stone altar, and upon it lay a relic unlike anything they had ever seen. It was a small spherical object, glowing with an inner light. The air around it felt charged, as if it were alive, waiting for something. Suddenly, the ground beneath them cracked open, and a voice, deep and resonant, though not human, echoed through the ruins. "Welcome to our world," the voice said. "We have waited for you." Lyra's heart raced. The bipeds had arrived. But were they here to make peace or to conquer? The tension was unbearable. The fate of the galaxy now rested in the hands of these mysterious beings, and one question burned in Lyra's mind. What did the bipeds truly want? This was just the beginning. The ancient secrets unveiled. The eerie voice echoed through the ruins, sending shivers down the spines of everyone present. Ambassador Lyra and her team stood frozen, the strange glow from the relic casting long shadows across the stone walls. The words that had just been spoken hung heavy in the air. They had barely landed on this forgotten world, and now it seemed that the very ground beneath their feet was alive with energy. The bipeds had waited for them. Lyra's instincts screamed at her to be cautious. "Everyone, stay close and stay alert," she commanded, though her own voice trembled slightly. She was trying to mask her fear, but there was something undeniably unsettling about the way the ancient ruins seemed to stir to life in response to the relic's presence. The crew looked on in silence, their eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and dread. The air around them hummed, vibrating with an unseen force that seemed to pull at their very souls. The relic at the center of the altar glowed brighter, its light pulsing like a heartbeat, synchronized with the rhythm of the ground beneath them. "Who are you?" Lyra asked, her voice steady despite the rising tension. She knew they had to gain information, but part of her was afraid to hear the answer. The bipeds had been a myth, a forgotten legend, yet now they were here, and they seemed to hold the power to reshape everything the galaxy knew. The voice responded, though this time it was deeper, more resonant, as if it came from the heart of the planet itself. "We are the children of the Old Ones, the forgotten race that once ruled the stars. We are the bipeds you have heard of in your legends, and we have returned to reclaim what was lost." The words sent a shockwave through Lyra's mind. The children of the Old Ones. The legends spoke of a race so powerful that they had once dominated the galaxy, only to vanish without a trace. No one knew why they disappeared, but their sudden return could mean the end of everything the galactic civilizations had worked for. The ground beneath them continued to tremble, and Lyra felt a deep sense of foreboding. What did they want? Reclaiming what was lost. Did that mean the galaxy, or something more? Her heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to show any fear. It was her duty to understand what these bipeds were after. As she cautiously approached the relic, The team behind her watched, their faces pale with uncertainty. The relic, a small spherical object with intricate markings running across its surface, seemed to hum in response to her movements. It felt alive, as though it recognized her presence. The air grew even colder, and suddenly, the walls of the ruins began to shift, revealing hidden pathways and chambers that had been sealed for millennia. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of their footsteps. Lyra motioned for her team to follow, her mind racing with questions, her thoughts clouded by the weight of the unknown. The deeper they ventured into the ruins, the more the ancient technology seemed to activate. The walls flickered with strange holographic images, maps, star charts, and symbols that none of them could decipher. It was clear that the biped's technology was far beyond anything they had encountered before. It was as if the very fabric of space and time bent to their will. "We need to understand this," Lyra murmured, more to herself than to her team. These symbols, they could be the key to unlocking the mystery of the bipeds. As they walked further, they entered a grand chamber, the walls adorned with murals that depicted scenes of ancient wars and battles fought across distant stars. But there was something different about the images. The warriors in the murals weren't humanoid. They were strange, multi-limbed beings with glowing eyes, their faces twisted in expressions of triumph and rage. Lyra had never seen anything like them before. "These are not the bipeds," one of her crew members whispered, his voice tinged with awe. "These are something else." Lyra nodded grimly. "The bipeds are the descendants of this ancient race. But why did they leave? And why have they returned?" Before she could answer her own questions, the air in the chamber grew thick with energy. The relic in her hand vibrated violently, and the walls of the chamber began to shift. The holographic images flickered, and suddenly, a new image appeared, an image of a distant star, surrounded by a swirling black void. It was a warning. "The Star of Despair," the voice boomed again, this time much louder, shaking the chamber to its core. "You are too late. The darkness has already spread." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The Star of Despair, the ancient prophecy spoke of it. A star that would signal the end of the known galaxy. If the bipeds were truly tied to this prophecy, then their return was far more dangerous than they had imagined. "What does it mean?" Lyra demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. "What does this darkness mean for us?" The voice was cold, unyielding. "It means that the galaxy is doomed. The stars will die. The worlds will burn. And only the strongest will survive." Suddenly, the floor beneath them cracked open, and a hidden door slid open, revealing a vast underground chamber. Inside, there was a massive ancient ship, its hull adorned with the same strange symbols that had appeared on the holograms. The ship seemed to pulse with life, its engines glowing faintly, as though it had been waiting for this moment. Lyra's team stared in disbelief. "Is this their ship?" one of her crew members asked. "Yes," Lyra said, her voice filled with a sense of foreboding. "But we don't know if we're ready for what it holds." As they stepped closer to the ship, Lyra's mind raced. The bipeds had returned, and their power was far greater than anything the galaxy had ever seen. But what were they truly after? Were they conquerors? Survivors? Or something even more terrifying? This was just the beginning. The galaxy was about to face its greatest threat, and no one knew if they could survive what was coming. The secrets of the bipeds were buried in the ruins, and they would have to uncover them before it was too late. The secret of the Star of Despair. The silence in the chamber was deafening. Lyra's mind raced as she stood before the ancient ship, the relic pulsing in her hand, its vibrations growing stronger. Her crew was visibly shaken, yet there was an unspoken determination in their eyes. They had come this far, and they were not about to turn back now. But what lay ahead was more than just a simple mystery. It was the key to the galaxy's survival or its destruction. Lyra's hand tightened around the relic. The Star of Despair. She had heard the legends, Whispers passed down through generations of scholars and diplomats. A star that would signal the end of everything. But this was real. The bipeds' return was no coincidence. They had come for something, and Lyra could feel the weight of it pressing down on her. "What is this place?" whispered Callan, one of her crew members, his voice filled with awe. The large, ominous ship loomed over them, its metal surface scarred by time, yet strangely unmarked by decay. The strange symbols on its hull glowed faintly in the dim light, shifting and changing with an almost sentient grace. "It's not just a ship," Lyra said softly, more to herself than to anyone in particular. "This is a weapon that the bipeds must have built in the ancient days, long before their disappearance." "What are they going to do with it?" Callan asked. Lyra turned to face him, her face grim. "I don't know, but I intend to find out." As Lyra approached the ship, the air seemed to thicken, as if the vessel itself was aware of her presence. The relic in her hand pulsed with a rhythmic beat, its glow intensifying as she stepped closer. She felt as though she was being drawn in, compelled to uncover the secrets buried within. Lyra placed her hand on the ship's hull. The symbols beneath her fingers shimmered, and a low hum reverberated through the chamber. The ship's massive doors creaked, then slowly began to open, revealing a dark, hollow interior. Inside, the air smelled stale, as if it had been sealed for millennia. But there was something else, something more unsettling. The ship's energy systems were still active, a faint glow emanating from the corridors beyond. Whoever, whatever, the bipeds were, they had designed this ship with a purpose, and that purpose was yet to be revealed. Lyra turned to her crew, motioning for them to follow. "We'll go in, but we stay together. No one strays. Understand?" Her team nodded, and one by one, they stepped into the ship. The door slammed shut behind them with a heavy thud, sealing them inside. As they ventured deeper into the ship, the silence was suffocating. The only sounds were the soft echoes of their footsteps and the distant hum of the ship's systems. The walls were adorned with more of the strange symbols, and though they could not understand them, Lyra felt their significance. They were not just decoration, they were a warning. They moved cautiously, each step taking them further into the heart of the ship. The corridors twisted and turned, seemingly endless, as though the very architecture of the vessel had been designed to disorient. The ship was a labyrinth, and Lyra was certain it had been built that way on purpose. Suddenly, the air changed. The temperature dropped, and a faint, eerie sound filled the air. It was a voice, soft at first, barely audible, but growing louder with each passing moment. The crew stopped, their faces pale. "Do you hear that?" Callan whispered. Lyra nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "I do." The voice grew louder, now unmistakable. It wasn't human. It wasn't even alien in the way they understood it. It was ancient, full of power, and it spoke in a language that none of them could comprehend. But then, as if sensing their confusion, the voice shifted. The words became clearer, more familiar. "You are too late." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The voice was unmistakable. It was the same voice they had heard earlier, the one that had come from the depths of the ruins. "Who are you?" Lyra demanded, her voice echoing through the ship's corridors. "What do you want?" The voice answered, but this time it seemed to emanate from the ship itself. "We are the children of the Old Ones. We were once masters of the stars, but we are not the ones who will end this galaxy. You have already begun what we could not." Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you talking about?" The voice seemed to laugh, a hollow, chilling sound that filled the ship's walls. "The Star of Despair was not created to end the galaxy. It was created to save it, but only the strongest will survive the darkness that comes. Only those who are ready to face the truth of the universe will emerge victorious." Lyra's mind raced. "You're talking about the darkness, the prophecy, but what does it mean? What is this darkness?" The voice grew fainter, but its words were etched into her mind. The darkness is not a force. It is a truth. The universe is a lie. The galaxy you know is a prison, and soon the walls will crumble. With that, the voice fell silent. The air in the ship grew thick, heavy with the weight of its words. The crew stood frozen, uncertainty and fear swirling in their minds. "We need to get out of here," Kalen said, his voice shaking. "This ship, it's not what we thought." But Lyra stood still, her eyes wide with realization. The bipeds were not just returning to reclaim what was lost. They were returning to set the galaxy on a path of destruction and rebirth. The truth they had revealed, the darkness, was something far greater than anyone had ever imagined. She had to know more. The fate of the galaxy depended on it. Unveiling the prophecy, the crew stood in silence, trying to process the words of the mysterious voice. The air inside the ship had grown colder, and the echoes of the strange message still resonated in their minds. Lyra could feel the weight of it all pressing down on her, like an invisible force urging her to find answers. They had come seeking knowledge, but now they were faced with a truth that none of them were ready to understand. What did it mean? Kalen asked, his voice trembling. He was usually the brave one, the rock that kept everyone grounded. But now he looked pale and uncertain. Lyra swallowed, trying to calm her racing heart. "I don't know," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "But I think we're getting closer to the truth. We need to find the source of that voice and figure out what it was trying to tell us." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had followed Lyra this far, and there was no turning back now. The ship was vast, its corridors twisting and turning like a maze, but Lyra felt an instinct pulling her forward, guiding her deeper into the heart of the vessel. They moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing through the seemingly endless hallways. The further they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The walls seemed to close in on them, the air thick with the scent of ancient technology, and the soft hum of the ship's energy systems was now accompanied by a faint whisper, almost as if the ship itself was alive, aware of their presence. Lyra's hand tightened around the relic she had found earlier. It pulsed with an eerie glow, and the vibrations had grown stronger as they moved through the ship. She wasn't sure what it was, but she knew it was important. The relic felt like a key, a piece of something much larger, and she had to find out what. As they rounded a corner, they came upon a large chamber, its walls lined with more of the shifting symbols that Lyra had come to recognize. In the center of the room stood a massive stone pedestal, its surface covered in ancient writings. At the top of the pedestal, a glowing orb floated, its light pulsating in rhythm with the relic in Lyra's hand. "This is it," Lyra whispered. "This is what we've been looking for." The crew gathered around the pedestal, their eyes wide with awe. The orb seemed to draw them in, its light hypnotic and mesmerizing. Lyra could feel the power radiating from it, and for a moment she wondered if this was the source of the darkness that the voice had warned them about. "This is the prophecy stone," Lyra murmured, recognizing the shape of the symbols on the pedestal. The ancient bipeds must have used it to record their visions of the future. Kellen stepped closer, his eyes scanning the stone. "But what does it say? What does it mean?" Lyra placed the relic against the pedestal. The moment it touched the stone, the room seemed to tremble, and the orb's light flared brightly. A deep, resonant voice echoed through the chamber. This time, Lyra recognized it as the same voice they had heard earlier. "You have come to claim the knowledge of the old ones," the voice said, its tone ominous and filled with foreboding. "But be warned, this knowledge is not for the weak. The truth is a burden, and it will tear apart those who are not prepared to face it." Lyra felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She had come seeking answers, but now she wasn't sure if she was ready for what was about to be revealed. The voice continued. "The prophecy speaks of two paths, the path of destruction and the path of rebirth. The bipeds, once the rulers of the stars, left behind their legacy in the hope that someone would find it. But not all who seek the truth are worthy. The darkness you feel is not a shadow. It is the weight of the truth. The galaxy is not as it seems. It was never meant to be united. It was never meant to be peaceful. Lyra's heart pounded as the voice spoke of the galaxy's true nature. This was bigger than anything she had imagined. She had thought they were seeking knowledge to understand the bipeds and their disappearance, but now she realized that they had stumbled upon something much more dangerous, a prophecy that could change the fate of the entire galaxy. "You must decide," the voice continued. "Will you embrace the truth and face the consequences, or will you choose ignorance and let the galaxy continue on its doomed path?" Lyra stepped back, the weight of the decision pressing heavily on her shoulders. The relic in her hand pulsed with intensity, as if urging her to make a choice. She glanced at her crew, their faces filled with fear and uncertainty. "I don't know what to do," Callan admitted, his voice shaky. "How can we make a decision like this? We're not prepared for something like this." Lyra turned her gaze back to the orb. The truth was there, waiting for them to uncover it. But the cost could be more than they were willing to pay. Could they face the consequences of knowing the truth? Was it worth the risk? "We need to know what the prophecy says," Lyra said finally, her voice firm. "We need to know what happens next. The galaxy deserves to know the truth. Whatever comes, we face it together." As she spoke, the orb's light flared once again, and a vision appeared before them. An image of the galaxy, its stars burning brightly, then slowly dimming as a shadow spread across the void. The vision was brief, but the message was clear. The galaxy was teetering on the edge of something terrible, and the choices made in this moment would determine its fate. The room fell silent, the weight of the vision hanging in the air. Lyra knew they were no longer just explorers. They had become part of a larger story, one that would determine the future of the galaxy. And whatever came next, they had to face it together. The choice of destiny. The room was still, the echo of the prophecy lingering in the air. Lyra stood frozen, her gaze fixed on the glowing orb. The vision it had shown them, the galaxy dimming, consumed by an unseen shadow, haunted her thoughts. She had never imagined that their journey would lead them here, to the crossroads of destiny. The weight of the choice lay heavily on her shoulders. The rest of the crew gathered around her, their faces filled with uncertainty and fear. Callan's usual confidence had dissolved into quiet contemplation, his eyes darting between Lyra and the orb. It was clear that no one had expected this, a decision that could either save the galaxy or doom it. "What do we do now?" asked Ilara, her voice barely above a whisper. Her fingers nervously brushed through her dark hair as she stepped closer to the pedestal. "The prophecy. It's too much. We don't even understand half of what it's telling us." Lyra looked at her, feeling the weight of her own doubts. How could they possibly understand the magnitude of what they were dealing with? They were explorers, not warriors, not leaders of armies. Yet here they were, faced with the knowledge that their next step could change everything. "We must choose," Lyra replied, her voice steady but filled with the fear she could no longer hide. The voice told us, destruction or rebirth. The galaxy is on the edge, and we're the only ones who can decide which path it will take. Are we even qualified to make a decision like this? Callan asked, his tone tinged with desperation. He looked at Lyra as though waiting for her to provide an answer, but she had none to give. How could they make this decision with so little knowledge? They had no idea what the consequences of either choice would be, no understanding of the true nature of the threat. "We don't have a choice," Lyra said, her voice rising slightly. "The galaxy is already on a dangerous path. If we don't act, if we don't make a decision, the darkness will swallow everything." As if on cue, the orb's light flickered again, casting eerie shadows across the room. It pulsed with energy, as if urging them forward, pushing them to make a decision. Lyra's fingers brushed against the stone pedestal, feeling the ancient markings beneath her fingertips. There was a strange connection between her and the relic she had discovered earlier, and she knew it had something to do with the prophecy. It was as though the relic was guiding her toward an answer, but the answer was still hidden from view. This darkness, this shadow, it feels like more than just a threat, Ilara said, her voice growing stronger. It's something ancient, something we weren't meant to uncover. Maybe we shouldn't meddle with it. Maybe we should turn back. The words stung, cutting into Lyra's resolve. She had come this far, brought her crew this far, and now the idea of retreating felt like the ultimate failure. The prophecy was not just a warning. It was a calling, one that they could not ignore. It was the truth of the galaxy, buried for eons, and now it was in their hands. Turning back wasn't an option. No, Lyra said firmly. We can't turn back. Not now. The galaxy deserves the truth. We have to make this decision, even if it costs us everything. But as she spoke, doubt lingered. Could they truly carry the weight of such a decision? Could they be the ones to save or destroy the galaxy? They were no longer just a crew of explorers. They had become the guardians of the future. The orb's light flared brighter, its glow washing over them like a wave of pure energy. The room seemed to pulse in rhythm with the energy, and the very air felt charge. The crew stepped back, instinctively drawn to the force that now filled the chamber. Lyra, we can't ignore the consequences, Kalen said, his voice low and strained. What if we choose wrong? What if the darkness is the only way to restore balance? His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their meaning. The idea that the darkness might be the necessary force to restore balance was a terrifying thought. But it wasn't the first time they had encountered such paradoxes in the galaxy. They had seen empires rise and fall, species fall into ruin, and countless civilizations teeter on the edge of destruction. Was it possible that the shadow was not something to fight, but something they needed to embrace? I don't have all the answers, Lyra said, her voice soft but resolute. But I know that if we don't make a choice, if we don't take action, we will never know, and the galaxy will continue to spiral into chaos. The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows deeper, as the crew exchanged uncertain glances. Each of them felt the pressure of the decision, the immense responsibility that had been thrust upon them. But the truth was clear. There was no turning back now. We don't have to make the choice alone, Lyra said, her gaze sweeping over the crew. We make it together. We'll face whatever comes together. We will be the ones to decide what the galaxy becomes. Kalen nodded, his expression firming with resolve. Then we stand with you, Lyra. We make this choice together. Ilara, too, stepped forward, a new determination in her eyes. Together. With that, the crew made their decision. Whatever came next, they would face it united. They would make the choice for the galaxy, no matter the cost. The orb's light began to pulse even faster, as if it had been waiting for them to decide. The room trembled, and the ancient voice returned, this time stronger and clearer than before. Your choice has been made. Now you must face the consequences. The galaxy will never be the same. The crew stood together, bracing themselves for what was to come. The galaxy was about to change, and they were the ones who would shape its future. The reckoning begins. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the ancient voice echoed through the chamber. A warning, a promise, a challenge. The decision had been made, but with it came an unshakable truth. Nothing would be the same again. The crew, still processing the enormity of their choice, stood in tense silence, waiting for something to happen, anything. The orb, now pulsating with unnatural energy, seemed to hum with life, its power growing stronger by the second. Lyra's heart raced. She could feel the air thickening around her, charged with a force she couldn't fully understand. She glanced at Kalen and Ilara, both of them visibly shaken but determined. They had chosen to stand together, to face whatever the future held, but the reality of the consequences was becoming painfully clear. What if they had made the wrong choice? What if the darkness wasn't the enemy, but the key to saving the galaxy? The uncertainty gnawed at her, but there was no turning back now. The orb's light flared once more, and the room around them seemed to distort. The walls pulsed like living flesh, and for a brief moment, the crew felt as though they were no longer in the physical world. They were somewhere else, somewhere beyond time and space, caught in a cosmic web of forces far greater than anything they had ever encountered. The air was thick with the energy of the prophecy, and it was almost as if the galaxy itself was holding its breath. "We've activated something," Kalen muttered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the orb. "Something far beyond our understanding." Lyra nodded grimly. "We've triggered the reckoning. Whatever happens next, we have to face it." Suddenly, the orb's light began to shift, changing colors in a mesmerizing dance of blue and red. The energy surged, and with it came a strange sense of weightlessness. Lyra felt as if the very fabric of reality was bending around them. For a moment, she thought she saw something, an image, a vision, or perhaps a warning. It was a planet, spinning in the vastness of space, its surface covered with vast oceans and towering cities. But something was wrong. The sky above it was darkening, and the waters below seemed to be boiling, rising in violent waves. It was as though the entire planet was on the brink of collapse, consumed by an invisible force. "Ilara," Lyra said urgently, "do you see that?" Ilara's eyes widened as she nodded. "Yes. The vision. It's showing us something. A warning." Before they could react, the orb's light intensified, and the ground beneath them shook with such force that they had to steady themselves. The crew was thrown off balance, but they managed to hold their ground. The vision became clearer, cities burning, the sky filled with smoke, and the boiling oceans crashing against the shores. It was a vision of devastation, and it was heading their way. "We've triggered the darkness," Kalen said, his voice grim. "The reckoning has begun." A cold chill swept through the room, and Lyra could feel the tension rising. The choice they had made wasn't just a decision. It was a catalyst, an event that would set the galaxy on a path from which there would be no return. The darkness was no longer a distant threat. It was here, and they were responsible for unleashing it. The orb pulsed again, its energy now overwhelming. The room seemed to twist and warp, the walls stretching and contracting, as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. Lyra felt her stomach lurch as she was pulled forward, her vision blurring. The crew was being drawn into something far greater than they could comprehend, their fates intertwined with the ancient prophecy they had dared to uncover. As the light reached its peak, the orb suddenly shattered with a deafening roar, its energy exploding outward in a burst of blinding light. Lyra was thrown backward, her body crashing into the cold stone floor. She struggled to get to her feet, disoriented and shaken, but the ground beneath her seemed to be shifting. The room was no longer the same. The walls were gone, replaced by an endless expanse of stars and swirling cosmic energy. It was as though they had been transported into the very heart of the galaxy itself. "We're not in the same place anymore," Ilara said, her voice trembling as she looked around in disbelief. This is beyond our understanding." Lyra took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The galaxy was no longer just a map of stars and planets. It was alive, shifting, reacting to their presence. They had crossed a threshold, and they had no idea what lay on the other side. "Where are we?" Kalen asked, his voice low with awe. "What is this place?" "I don't know," Lyra replied, feeling the weight of their decision pressing down on her. "But we're about to find out." The galaxy, once a vast and unknowable expanse, now felt closer, more intimate. The energy surrounding them pulsed with power, and for the first time, Lyra felt like they were at the very center of everything. But at the same time, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had opened a door that should have stayed closed. The darkness was no longer just a distant threat. It was real, and it was coming for them. And with it came the undeniable truth. Their choice had set something in motion, something that no one, not even the galaxy itself, could control. As the crew stood together in the heart of the cosmos, The weight of their decision settled over them. They had crossed the line. There was no turning back now. The reckoning had begun, and only time would tell if they had chosen the galaxy's salvation or its doom. The final confrontation. The stars above seemed to pulse in rhythm with the crew's racing hearts, their every breath echoing in the vast emptiness around them. The cosmic energy that had once been awe-inspiring now felt like a crushing weight, pressing in on them from all sides. The galaxy, vast and seemingly indifferent to their struggles, had become a living, breathing entity, and the crew could feel it watching them. Lyra, Kalen, and Ilara stood at the center of this swirling vortex of power, unsure of what awaited them. The darkness, the reckoning, it was no longer a concept. It was real, and it was moving toward them. The vision from the orb had not been a warning but a promise. The devastation shown was not a distant possibility, but a present reality. "This is it," Kalen whispered, his voice barely audible above the cosmic hum. "We've reached the point of no return." Lyra nodded, her eyes scanning the vast, star-filled expanse. "We don't have time to second-guess ourselves. We have to act, or everything we'd fought for will be lost." The words hung heavy in the air, but the crew was resolute. They had made their choice, and now they had to see it through. The universe was watching, waiting to see if humanity's fate would be sealed in this final moment. Suddenly, the darkness shifted. A wave of energy, black as the void itself, surged forward, consuming everything in its path. The stars above flickered and dimmed as the wave advanced, its pull irresistible, its power unimaginable. It was the force they had unleashed, and now it was coming for them. "We need to stop it," Ilara shouted, her voice laced with urgency. "We can't let it spread any further." The crew, driven by a single shared purpose, sprang into action. But as they prepared to face the darkness, something unexpected happened. The orb's energy, the very force they had invoked, began to converge upon them. The light from the shattered relic pulsed wildly, weaving together into a brilliant, blinding beam that stretched across the cosmos. Lyra felt a surge of energy fill her veins, as if the galaxy itself had chosen them to carry out its final will. It was both a gift and a curse, a power too great for any one being to fully control. But they had no choice now. They were the galaxy's last hope. "Hold on," Kalen shouted, grabbing Lyra's arm as the energy enveloped them. His voice was filled with determination, but even he couldn't fully mask the fear in his eyes. "We've come this far. We can't back down." The darkness, relentless and unyielding, was now in full force. It was a void that consumed everything: planets, stars, entire civilizations. It was the end of everything they knew, the universe's great reckoning. But Lyra refused to let it win. They had come too far. Humanity had already shown that it could survive the impossible. Now it was time to prove that they could overcome the darkness itself. As the cosmic energy enveloped them, Lyra felt a connection, a bond with the very essence of the universe, the stars, the planets, the life in every corner of the galaxy. It was all connected. And in that moment, Lyra knew what they had to do. "We fight," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling around them. "We fight with everything we have." And with that, they released the energy, a beam of pure light, far stronger than anything they had ever known. It cut through the darkness like a sword, carving a path through the void, pushing back against the unstoppable wave. For a moment, it felt as though the very fabric of the galaxy was stretching, straining under the weight of their will. The darkness faltered, hesitating for the first time, as the crew's power collided with it. But the darkness wasn't finished. It recoiled only for a moment before surging forward with renewed force. It was a battle that could not be won with strength alone. It would take every ounce of humanity's ingenuity, creativity, and resilience. "We can't do it alone," Lyra shouted, realizing the truth. "We need to reach out to the galaxy. We need help." As the darkness surged again, the crew did the unthinkable. They reached out, using the power of the orb to send a signal across the galaxy. They called out to every sentient species, every civilization that had ever witnessed the light of the stars. It was a plea, a call to unite in the face of annihilation. The response was instantaneous. Across the galaxy, stars flickered back to life. Ships, once dormant, came to life, joining the fight. Civilizations that had once viewed humanity with suspicion now stood together, united by a common enemy. The darkness, once so overwhelming, now found itself facing a force it could not defeat. The galaxy fought back. For the first time, the darkness faltered. It recoiled, pushed back by the combined strength of every species, every starship, every force of will that had come together. The reckoning had not gone as the ancient prophecy had foretold. It was not the end of the galaxy, but its rebirth. Lyra watched as the darkness began to retreat, its grip on the galaxy weakening. The stars began to shine again, brighter than ever before. Humanity, once considered a small and insignificant species in the vastness of the cosmos, had proven its worth. The galaxy had learned that the true strength of humanity lay not in its power alone, but in its ability to unite, to fight for what was right. As the final remnants of the darkness were pushed back into the void, Lyra, Callan, and Ilara stood together, exhausted but victorious. They had done it. They had saved the galaxy. But in the quiet that followed the battle, they knew the fight was not over. The galaxy had changed forever, and they had changed with it. They had become part of something greater, something that transcended the darkness, the void, and the unknown. And as the stars began to shine once more, humanity stood at the dawn of a new age.